Hello again, my little conscripts, and welcome to another Mordian Glory video. Today's episode is going to be a tournament after action report. That's right, it's time for some more dispatches from the front lines. And oh boy, do I have a spicy meatball for your viewing pleasure, because I took my pet Warhound Titan Kevin to a tournament. It was full of heady heights and terrible lows, but it was a ton of fun. And so you know what? Let's not mess around any further. Let's cry havoc and let's slip the Warhound of War. As is tradition, I want to start off this report with a few thank yous. Firstly, I want to say a big thank you to the tournament organiser, my mate, and the head of the Northern Warlords Club, Matt Robbo, for organising this tournament. The whole vibe was, it's the end of year, it's 2024, it's the Christmas event, let's make it a special one, everyone bring your big stompy things. And I think it's thanks to Robbo really hammering that point home that this event was so much fun, because we all got to bring out a ton of models we wouldn't normally include. I wasn't the only one there with the Titan, and overall it was just a fantastic event. I also want to do a shout out to the venue for the event, which was Just Play. If you're familiar with my Torn After Action reports, you'll know that I'm a big fan of the Just Play store. They're a friendly local gaming store and they just do a really good job. It's your quintessential RTT environment, and every single time I've been to one of their events, I've always come away just having a ton of fun. Sometimes it's an absolute shark tank, sometimes it's a bit more of a casual affair, but always you're going to have a good time. And last but certainly not least, I want to say thank you to all of my opponents, because every single one of them was a true gent. You can't play a good game of 40k without having a good opponent, and I can safely say that all of my opponents were fantastic. But without further ado, let's get into the video proper, and we'll start off with the bit that you all love, the army list overview. As per usual, I have done a separate video deep diving the army list and getting into the fine details and the nitty gritty. And I'll make sure there's a link to that video down in the description of this one. But if you just want a quick overview now, here's what I was running. Of course, we had Kevin the Warhound Titan. He was equipped with a Plasma Blast Gun and the Vulcan Mega Bolter. These are not the best choices for the Titan. I think arguably you want to go for that twin turbo laser, but it's the traditional loadout. It's the one you see in all of the pictures, in all of the artwork, and for me, it's just quintessential. And a Warhound Titan doesn't look right unless it's got the Blast Gun and the Vulcan Mega Bolter. Supporting the Titan is essentially a load of screening units. My main firepower and damage dealing is going to come from the Titan. I need the rest of the army to kind of just keep the enemies at bay so the Titan can keep firing, because let me tell you, this thing isn't as tough as it looks, and I have had it go down in a single round of combat before. Admittedly, it was Angron, but Angron is about the third of the points this thing, so you want to have those screens up to try and keep it alive. So I had 4 blobs of infantry, 3 Death Corps of Krieg. They each had 2 melter guns, 2 plasma guns, 2 grenade launchers, and we had the medibag, and we had 2 sergeants with plasma pistol and power sword each, and each one of those Death Corps of Krieg blobs was led by a Death Corps marshal. One of those Krieg blobs did have a commissar leading it in addition. That was just for fun, because having a commissar leading a blob of infantry just looks cool. I also had a 4th blob of infantry, which was Catachans. These are in the Mordian colour scheme, and they had 4 flamers, and they were led by the heroes Strachan and Harker. One of the reasons for taking this blob was to give me a bit of scout, but the other reason was as a final send-off to Strachan and Harker, both of which who are going to be going away in the upcoming Guard Codex. And as we go through this tournament report, I will do my best to keep track of what Strachan manages to kill, and I'll also try and leave it as a pinned comment down in the description so we can keep a track of the Strachan kill tally. Finally, we had a unit of 5 Tempestus Scions. They were there just for a little bit of secondary game. That just about wraps up the list overview. Now let's get into the lay of the land. How competitive was this event, and what was the terrain like? Overall, I would describe this event as casual. It was an end of year Christmas bash Everyone's bringing out big stompy models, like I said. Ida Titan, there was lots of other big crazy lists out there. And as you'll see throughout the games, most people were either bringing meme lists or were just bringing some models they don't normally get an opportunity to use. The level of play was still really high though, but most people there weren't afraid to let go of making the most efficient choice and forging the narrative a little bit more than you would normally expect at a tournament. As for the terrain, it was a mixture of the Just Play terrain, which is their own format using the terrain that they have available, but they've also recently invested in some of the UKTC terrain, and they're also looking to continually update their terrain as well. So previously, whenever I've been to Just Play, they've kind of had their own custom layout and they've just been making do and doing the best they can with the terrain they've got, and it has been pretty effective. But they know that a lot of people like to play on specific formats. They like to play on UKTC, they like to play on WTC, so they've started incorporating that into their tournaments as well. And they're just going to see how it goes, and if people really respond well to it, they're going to increase investing in a variety of terrain styles, which is really good, and I think shows that they listen to the feedback from the community. But that's enough pre-game, preamble, if you will. I know why you're all really here. Let's get to the main event, the hot tamale. Let's get into the games. So one of the things about this tournament was that it was running custom missions and they were all Christmas themed. And honestly, before you all click off the video going, oh, custom missions, blah, 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 it was a ton of fun. It was really good. And it's actually kind of opened my eye a little bit to running custom missions and having some different style of event. We've all played the same missions in 10th edition 100 times. This was actually a breath of fresh air. And the mission in game one was the gift. Now, I've thrown the text up here for you guys in case you want to take this and use it for your own games. But the gist of it is normal objectives, but units can pick them up and move them around a little bit. If they do, they can only move so far. And also, there's a chance that the objective will do more wounds to you, or it might actually start letting you heal models, which is kind of cool. Now, my opponent for game one was this absolute Giga Chad. He's a member of the Mordian Glory community. Some of you will know him by his online name, FPS Liverpool. Now, me and FPS have played against each other loads of times. He's cropped up in a few of our tournament after action reports, and he's always a ton of fun to play against. And in this event, he went all out. Normally he just wears normal clothes, but today he was embracing the vibe of the Christmas event and he turned up in full World War I regalia, which is really, really cool. Now, my opponent's whole thing is that he loves big tanks. I have known him to touch tournaments wearing a Ask Me About My TOG 2 t-shirt. And so when given the opportunity to touch a tournament with big units, big stompy things, he understood the assignment. In this list, we had a Praetor, we had a Stormblade, we had a couple of Malcadors, there was a tank commander rolling around. There was also a Carnodon, which I think this is the first ever recorded use of a Carnodon, A, being used, and B, in a tournament. But let's get into the game, and this is what deployment looked like once everything had been thrown onto the board. You can see that I've got a couple of Krieg blobs over on the left flank, and I've also got a big Catachan blob over on the right flank. In the center, I've got my Titan, and obscured from view, we've got a third Krieg blob. In fact, if we zoom in, you can just see a little bit of a base from one of the Kriegers down there. And those of you who want a bit of close-up detail, here's a picture of my left flank, the middle, and the right flank. And I've also got some pictures of my opponent's deployment as well. Here we have got what would be his left flank, his middle, and his right flank. With everything deployed, it was time to find out who was going to get that first turn. We rolled off, and it was the Traitor Guard, aka my opponent, who leapt into action and seized the initiative. So let me run you through what happened in the first couple of turns. The Traitor Guard basically pushed forward quite aggressively with their armor. I mean, when you're bringing this many tanks and your opponent's only real anti-tank is a handful of melter guns and a plasma blast gun, you know that you can be kind of aggressive. So we can see that the Carnodon and the Stormblade came around here and started putting shots into the Warhound, and then we also had the Malkador and Demolisher start coming down here. The Malkador also, this is the one with the Annihilator, also pushed forward, ready to put its firepower into the Warhound as well. Once all of my opponent's shooting had gone off, there was no damage done to the Warhound due to a combination of my opponent being quite unlucky and me being pretty bloody lucky, and the Warhound being actually quite tough. Like, that toughness 13 does make a difference. It was able to bounce most, if not all, of the shots. There was a bit of damage that came in from the Praetor, and it basically started working on the Catachans, and that's what it worked on nearly the whole game. Now you can see in my turn 1, I did not sit back idly. I pushed one of my Krieg blobs forward and got it onto the objective, and then I got the next Krieg blob ready, literally sending in wave after wave. The first wave goes in. When the man with the rifle dies, the man following him picks up the rifle. And I kind of needed to do my army in this way, because if I just go all out, well, I know what happens there. There's enough firepower in this guard army to pick up all of my infantry if they really want to. I've got to husband my resources and try and make sure that I am keeping my infantry alive as long as possible. I also pushed out in my turn 1 with the Strachan blob, and I did a secondary objective. I believe it was containment. In terms of my firepower, I put pretty much everything into the Malkador, and as you can see, I only did 8 wounds. You might think that seems really low, but you kind of have to remember that my highest strength is 10, and the Malkador can pop smoke, which makes it really difficult when you're only hitting on 4s with a Warhound. These things definitely should hit on 2s as standard. Going into the Traitor Guard turn 2, they punished me for my hubris. They were like, you are pushing infantry out against tanks. Well, we are going to take away your infantry. The Praetor launched an absolutely savage bombardment into the Catachans on the right, and it actually had direct fire onto them as well, because of the fact I had done containment, so I had to like poke out around the side of the ruin, and it did terrible, terrible damage. And over on the left, this is all that was left of my Krieg blob after a Malkador and a Leman Russ tank commander did their level best to send them to the Emperor's table. The enemy tanks also managed to do their first few wounds to the Titan, taking off 10 wounds in a furious barrage from the Stormblade. But you guys know the saying, when the guard get hit hard, we hit back even harder. And yes, that still does apply in a guard versus guard matchup. With the cry of fixed bayonets, it was my go turn. Platoon after platoon ran forward into no man's land, taking the fight to the enemy and doing their level best to do damage and tie up the Iron Behemoths. Over on the left flank, the Commissar and the Death Corps Marshal led their platoon forward in the second wave, and they fired everything they could into the Leman Russ tank commander. Melter guns, plasma pistols, laser rifles, everything we had went into this thing. But once again, thanks to that cheeky pop smoke, it didn't take that much damage. And in fact, after the crackle of weapons fire had dissipated, it was still alive on 9 wounds. Not phased, the Commissar did order the men to charge in, and they were able to tie the vehicle up. Not really doing any damage in combat to it, but also being able to tag the Malkador as well. They did this in an effort to buy time for their brothers from the remnants of the first wave to grab the objective and run back. Because I've been able to hold on to it, and thanks to custom mission, I'd actually managed to pick the relic up, and I started to move it back towards my lines. And thanks to the Krieg Medipack regaining 3 guys, the blob was looking a little healthier. And it was a similar story in the middle. Charging forward with lasguns set to kill, the Malkador was brought down to 3 wounds, and it probably would have died if my grenade stratagem had done anything. But I spent 1 CP through grenades, and I didn't get a single 4 up. that was a little bit frustrating. They don't build them like they used to. These Malcadors are tough, but we have managed to tie it up, and we've also got onto that primary objective as well. But what about the right flank? Well, nonplussed by the fact that he's taken 90% casualties on his platoon, Strachan orders the Shattered Remnants to move, and they actually managed to make a long bomb charge into the Supreme Command Blob of the Traitor Guard. And they go to town. They really start hacking and whacking and smacking. And Strachan starts doing his thing. And he ends up cutting down almost half of the command blob. Strachan single-handedly took 6 names from this unit. And the rest of the squad were able to do a number of wounds as well. In fact, so furious was their onslaught that rather than meeting me in single combat, the Lord Solar ended up falling back in his turn. A shameful display, but these traitors, they have no honor. Side note, I do think tactically it was absolutely the right move to fall back with that squad. I think that Strachan might have eventually beaten his way to the Lord Solar and actually killed him. He is just that good. Here's just a quick high-level picture of what the game looked like at the end of round 2. One last thing to mention is you can notice I brought my scions in down here. That was just for some secondary game. Now, due to the excitement of the game and with the clock ticking, there weren't many other opportunities to take photos of the game. So I'll have to run you through what happened over the next few turns. So at the start of Traitor Guard turn 3, they found themselves in a bit of a tricky position. A lot of their vehicles were now tied up in combat. If they fell back with them, it would mean that vehicles wouldn't be able to do anything. And considering my opponent's army was made up of a lot of single intensive, but, only a few of them units, it meant that falling back with each asset drastically reduced my opponent's firepower. In the end, the only vehicle he fell back with was the Malcador here. The Malcador here and the Tank Commander here did stay in combat. That was not a bad maneuver at all, because in the end, this tank commander was able to destroy the rest of the blob that had been holding the objective, and the Malcador started laying some serious wounds into the Warhound Titan. But staying in combat with the Guardsman wasn't without its own risks. And over the course of my opponent's turn 3 fight phase and my turn 3 fight phase, I was actually able to bring down the Malcador in the center. That was due to just a lot of bayonets and the fact that there are 3 power swords in this unit. But going into turn 4 and turn 5, the Krieg blob in the center really suffered from success. Sure, they'd beaten the Malcador, but now they were free to get shot at by a lot of other firepower. And over the course of turn 4 and turn 5, that Krieg blob was really whittled down to just a handful of survivors. As for the Lehman Russ tank commander, it eventually went down in combat as well, although I did have some support from some repositioning scions. Because I was running the bridgehead detachment, because I didn't have any vehicles, so I might as well give my infantry some reroll 1s, I was able to pick up my scions from here and bring them down here. Now, those scions were able to shoot into combat with the Lehman Russ, albeit at -1, and thanks to their little bit of firepower and then just some more gutsy bayonet work, we did manage to bring that tank commander down by the end of my turn 4. In my opponent's turn 5, this Malcador did what it could to thin out this Krieg blob, but they were able to survive and hold on to this objective. My opponent also had brought on some Kazakim from reinforcements and had been working their way around the flank here, and they tried to go after the Warhound, but even with their melter mine, they weren't able to destroy it. Speaking of the Warhound, you may have noticed that I've not mentioned it all that much. Well, that's because it was just really struggling in this game. I don't think I managed to do a single wound with its plasma blast gun. I was just getting phenomenally unlucky on the number of shots. And so really relying on a Vulcan Mega Bolter when you're facing an Imperial Guard tank company isn't ideal. However, turn 5 comes around and there's a chance to go for glory. You see, my Warhound had been trading firepower with that Stormblade pretty much the whole game, and it had been coming off the worst. I mean, admittedly, a lot of this firepower wasn't being done by the enemy Stormblade, it was being done by all of the tanks piling into the Warhound what felt like every turn. But going into turn 5, it was still alive. And I was like, okay, that's decent, that's good, because this thing's got so much objective control, and because I've gone second, I can sprint it onto the objective over here, which was being held by my opponent's Carnodon, and I can then actually shoot the Carnodon, destroy it, and hopefully flip that objective, getting me some more points. So in a burst of speed, my Warhound leaves its safety of its fire bunker and runs out to the objective here, and is just about ready to initiate Operation Carnodon Stomp when my opponent uses Overwatch. And he doesn't use it on the Stormblade because you can't use it on Titanic, but he can use it on his Malkador that's here. And this Malkador has got las cannon sponsons because that is something you can upgrade it with. And I'm like, well, it's not so bad. I mean, at the end of the day, it's only hitting on 6s. The likelihood is that I'll be able to just not get hit. 2 las cannons, 5 first, double 6, lethal hits. I fail both of my 5 up invulnerable saves, or 4 up armor saves. I fail both my 4 up armor saves, and Titan dies. And there is a picture of a very sad Titan-shaped hole. Kevin, he went for glory, he went for redemption, but sadly, that was denied. Some of you may be wondering what the hell Strachan had been up to this entire time. Essentially, after he'd got into combat with the Lord Solar Blob, the cowardly enemy general retreated backwards and then ended up charging the Praetor in to lock him up. Now, Strachan actually was able to take off almost half of the wounds from the Praetor, but eventually he was heavy bolted and run over. So for the Strachan tally game 1, he was able to claim 6 Guardsman heads and half a Praetor. But with all of that said, the dust settled, the game ended, and the final score was actually really close. Despite the fact that I had nearly been tabled with just the shattered remnants of a couple of platoons left over, I had managed to come out ahead on points. It was 51 points to the Traitor Guard and 56 points to me. Now, under normal GW scoring, that would be a minor win to myself, but at this event, they do tend to use WTC scoring, so that would have been a draw. So with game 1 down and having not lost it, which when you're running a Titan is an achievement in of itself, it's time to get into game number 2. So round 2, I get paired into Chris and his Chaos Demons. Now, I've actually played against Chris once before in one of these Torn After Action pods, and he was also using Chaos Demons then. That last time, he was running pure mono Khorne Demons. This time, he had mixed it up, and he was going full Monster Mash. And when I say full Monster Mash, I'm not talking like he's taken 3 or 4 Great Demons and the rest are objective scorers. I'm talking every single model in his army was a greater demon. And his list was a unholy alliance of Tzeentch and Nurgle. The god of change and the god of stagnation put aside their differences. And it was a really, really cool army. 3 Lords of Change and Kairos Fateweaver. And then 3 Great Unclean Ones and Rotigus. 8 Greater Demons. That was the entire list. As for the custom mission for round 2, it was Christmas Miracle. Essentially, both sides got access to Fate Dice / Miracle Dice. Each enemy unit that you destroyed added a Miracle Dice to your pool. And let me give you a bit of heavy foreshadowing, but giving Greater Demons access to Miracle Dice is a really, really bad idea. If the GW Spy is watching this video, if that's an idea that's been put into the Demon Codex 10th edition, take it out. Take it out right now. But let's get into the game proper. My deployment was really simple. Unit of Catachans on the left, couple of units of Kriegers in the middle, screening the Titan, and a unit of Kriegers on the right. I knew I didn't have to worry too much about hiding my units because my opponent's firepower was decent, but it's not like facing off against the most shooting in the world. And also I knew that I was going to have to screen because these demons are going to be dropping all around me. As for my opponent's deployment, he started with the Great and Clean ones on the board and Rotigus, and you can see them 1, 2, 3, and 4, one hiding behind this ruin here. And he also had Kairos Fate Weaver on the board as well. The other 3 Laws of Change were starting the game in Deep Strike Reserve. With everything deployed, it was time to get into the game. And we roll off, and the gods of the warp are feeling generous, and the Chaos Demons get the first turn. But when you're playing demons, you often don't really want to go first, so maybe the Chaos Gods were being fickle, because you want to go second so you can do the whole turn 1 uppy downy deep strike malarkey. As a result, the demon turn 1 was basically a pass. Nothing really moved except for the Great Unclean one with the 4 Feel No Pain enhancement, which basically moved towards the middle of the board. Likewise, my turn 1 was pretty straightforward and quick as well. I just moved forward 2 blobs, screen out. Ideally, I would have done this with 1 blob, but I'm not quite sure that a 22-man blob, when fully strung out, can screen the whole of the front lines. It was a bit inefficient throwing both blobs forward. It meant that I was essentially giving up half of my infantry for screening turn 1, and I don't have a huge amount. Like 80 is like enough in a normal guard army, but when the only firepower is this Titan and it's not a lot of firepower, it is a bit tricky. Speaking of firepower, I put everything I could from this blob and this Titan into this big old blob man, but he just took it. He's the 4-up Feel No Pain guy. At the end of the day, I don't think I've ever killed him in 1 round of combat. And I've had a lot more firepower and a lot higher quality firepower than a Titan try and do it. And they weren't able to achieve it. So sadly, Kevin tried his best. But I think in total, he ended up taking like 6 or 7 wounds off this thing. That was it. Fortunately, though, I had been able to move enough guardsmen onto the objective that I was denying it from my opponent. Although I have to admit, I do not envy these guys at all. Thank God they were Kriegers. They're made of sturdy enough stuff to face down the big demons. And for all of you Strachan and Harker fans, there's a close-up action shot of them leading the platoon forward turn 1. But turn 2 was crunch time. All of the Nurgle bastards came into play. The one in the middle turned around, it stopped wiggling its bum at me, and it started belly flopping all over my guardsmen. And between its firepower and the firepower support from Kairos Fate Weaver and its charge, there was only a handful of tattered survivors from the first Krieg wave. Also over on the left-hand flank where Strachan was, 2 more big demons of Nurgle came down, and between their vomit, they were able to do terrible damage to my Catachan blob. There were some survivors, and there was a small saving grace that they essentially took themselves out of charge range, the greater demons that is, but essentially the first screen was decimated. Guard turn 2, I desperately tried to coordinate my beleaguered forces into a counterattack, and I threw forward the second screen, and Strachan's blob went after the greater demons. Unfortunately, my opponent did use Overwatch, and so any hope Strachan had of maybe being able to bring down one of those great demons kind of went away. He did give it a really good go though, and he was the lone survivor who made the charge. God damn it, I do have to do everything myself. And he went in there and he managed to get all of his hits on, all of his wounds on, and my opponent didn't make almost any of their saves, and so he took more than half the wounds off. I think it was Rotigus himself. Sadly, that wasn't quite enough, and Strachan did get belly flopped by the big smelly boy. And things went from bad to worse, because in Demon turn 3, all of the Tzeentch boys turned up. Oh, the fires have changed. The warp fire was spilling out left, right, and center, engulfing everything in its path. Guardsmen went down. Kriegers went down. Commissars went down. Everything just went down. And there just was almost no infantry left by the end of my opponent's turn 3, and he was just stoically refusing to engage with the Titan, which is absolutely the right move, because the little infantry boys are going to run around maybe stopping you from doing objectives and stuff. They can tie up your greater demons, especially the Tzeentch ones in combat, because they're just not that good at that. And the Titan was proving to do next to no damage, because any time that I managed to get a wound through the plasma blast gun, because my opponent was picking up a blob of catchans with the 2 attached characters, that's 3 miracle dice for him, and he only needs to roll a 4+ on those miracle dice, and he's basically got an auto pass save on each one of those demons. Ugh. So he's got a whole bunch of those miracle dice, and every time the plasma blast gun comes in, it's just miracle dice and then just passing saves. I was trying to bring down greater demons with the Gatling cannon. Again, the plasma blast gun's just not having a good time this event. So with the writing on the wall, we could have just given up. We could have just called the game there. But we will not go quietly into the night. We will not go out without a fight. We will draw the line in the sand here. No further. We went for one last glorious countercharge. I summoned every last scrap of infantry that I had. I pushed it forward. My remaining creep blob went for a big old charge into one of the greater demons of Tzeentch, and Kevin, with his warhorn blaring, strode into the fight. Seeing the guardsmen bravely selling their lives to try and screen for him, Kevin decided that he would rather die as one of them than flee and survive and live in infamy. And so he strode into the middle of the board, firing his guns in every single direction. Any Battlestar Galactica fans, it's like the Pegasus coming in to save the Galactica. He was putting out Gatling cannon one way, blast gun the other way, and he charged into the greater demon of Nurgle, and he started stomping all over it. Image-wise, it sounded really, really cool. Damage-wise, if he did a wound, I would have been surprised. He just was doing nothing. He was looking good. This isn't flying. This is falling with style. Inspired by the Titan, my Kriegers started going toe-to-toe with this big nerd. And they actually... they were on track to beat it in combat. If this thing couldn't just like warp fire into combat, I reckon they probably would have been able to bring it down one by one. They were just taking wounds off it. And what was funny is I was just medicing enough of them back each turn so that I was below half strength, which meant that I had the +1 to wound, which actually made all the difference. Because it meant that I was wounding this thing on 5s, and it's only got a 4-up invuln, which against like big AP things is great. When you're just like stabbing it in the ankles with like bayonets, it's actually, that's enough. That's enough to start sneaking wounds past. Now, Kevin wasn't doing a lot of damage, but he was looking good, and he was intimidating the foe. In a display of pure cowardice, the big boy fell back. That alone means more victory. I made demons flee. When's the last time as guardsmen you made demons flee? Just saying. Just saying. This was a very tactical maneuver though, because it then meant that all of the greater demons could fire into my Titan. And I thought, you know what? I've got a good chance of just tanking all of this. The greater demons of Tzeentch have got a decent amount of firepower, but it's not overwhelming. And I'm on a 2-up save. I could probably get the benefit of cover because they can't see the whole model. I can have that. And I've got my 5-up invuln. Yeah, I should be okay against a lot of this. Unfortunately, Kevin had other ideas. This is the dice tray for when I had to make 7 3-up saves against multiple damage firebolts of Tzeentch. I didn't make a single 3-up. That ended up taking quite a few wounds off the old Warhound. Unfortunately, between my opponent's firepower round 4, my bad saves, and then my opponent's charges round 4, Kevin did go down. For a bit of fun, we did say that he auto-exploded. He did a whole bunch of mortal wounds, and he was actually able to wipe out 2 of the big Tzeentch demons. The Lord of Change here and Kairos Fate Weaver, because it's a really big explosion on the Deadly Demise. And that was the end of the game. The only survivor was this lone Deathcore Marshal, who did actually survive the exploding Titan. As you can see, it was pretty much a total smashing, and the demons definitely won game 2. And I thought, for your viewing pleasure, I'd throw up a few close-up shots of the demon models because they were beautifully painted. Here we've got one of the Lords of Change. We've got another one with a little Santa hat on. We've got Rotigus, the big boy. Classic Forge World Great Unclean one. And we've got a couple of the big boys as well. And lastly, the hero Deathcore Marshal, the only survivor on the guard front. And so we get to the final game of the day. And I was playing against Craig and his Tyranids. Now, I knew this was going to be a really good game. A really fun game. Because A, Guards versus Nids is a classic. And B, Craig's a really chill dude. We were actually in the same group that went to Adepticon earlier this year. And it was awesome. It was a ton of fun. And I turned to Craig at the beginning of this game and I was like, bro, it's the last game of the year. If you want to worry about doing the prime mission, you can do. I'm not saying don't. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do, man. I'm going to set myself a custom mission. I'm going to form all of my guys up in a big spearhead. I'm going to have all my infantry around my Titan. And I am going to have one goal. I'm going to destroy the alien hive. I'm going to go for your objective. If I get there and I hold at the end of the game, that's my personal objective achieved. And 100% credit to Craig. Do you know what he did? He went, yeah, you know what? Let's sack off the primary. I'm going to set myself a personal goal as well. I want to bring down that Titan. And I was like, cool. If you bring down a Titan, you win. If I get to the alien hive, I win. If we both do objectives, we'll call it a draw. And so that's exactly what we did. I slapped my Titan down in the middle. I had my Krieg blobs, one on each side, left, front, and on the right-hand side. And then I also had my Katachan blob, led by Strachan, at the front, scouting forward. Strachan was going to lead the charge into the alien hive. As for the Tyranid deployment, everything started off the board. Because they've got these big drop pod thingies, they can null deploy. Absolute meme list. Totally love it. So Craig had nothing on the board turn 1. My guys were repeating that line from the old school Fire Warrior game. It's quiet. It's quiet. It's quiet. Quick side note. Craig's army was all big monsters, for those that are curious about it. So we had, as you can see, winged hive tyrants, we had some trigons, we had some carnifexes, there was also lots of these drop pod thingies, and there was a hive tyrant that was also in a scratch built drop pod thing as well. Oh yeah, and it was also at this point that I realized I was playing next to Salty Simon himself, the High Admiral, and as you can see, he was really pleased to see me. But that's enough side notes and tangents. Let's get into this mission. Sir, is this going to be a stand-up fight or another bug hunt? Well, as far as my guardsmen were concerned, this battle started off perfectly. No enemies in sight, direct beeline to the alien hive. Everything moved forward as you could see, and the Imperium was feeling pretty confident at the end of turn 1. All of that changed though at the beginning of battle round 2. The sky darkened as messetic spores plummeted onto the battlefield. Emerging from their chitinous depths were untold, huge Tyranid Xenos monstrosities. On top of this, tunneling up from beneath the ground, were strange serpent-like beasts, bigger than a battle tank and twice as ugly. So yeah, start of turn 2, all the Tyranid army came in. And it was a lot of 9-inch charges. I'm telling you, it was a lot of 9-inch charges. Now, Craig was rolling his charges, and I have to say he was getting quite unlucky, and he kept failing them. So we did a little bit of the old cinema magic, and we made sure that a couple of them made it. Because there's no point in bringing an army like this, everything dropping in, and then you basically making no charges. That's just kind of lame. Overall, between legitimate charges and a few cheeky ones, Craig made it in with a Hive Tyrant, 2 Screamer Killers, and one of his Trigons. Now, those Tyranids started going to work, and as you can see, the blob on the Titan's right flank engaging 2 of the bugs is already starting to take some heavy casualties, and the blob on the left flank is doing its best to hold off one of the Trigons. However, Strachan and his mates had no problem with dealing with the Screamer Killer that charged them. In fact, between Overwatch actually doing something and then Strachan having his anti-monster, we were actually, and then some pretty lucky rolls on my end from the other chaps, because while Strachan's leading them, they do have lethal hits. And between Craig rolling pretty poorly on his armor saves, we were actually able to kill one of the Carnifexes straight away. And it was Strachan that did the final blow and the majority of the damage as well. So turn 2, Strachan has killed his first big bug. And I thought I'd share with you a few of the action shots from that second turn. Krieger's on the left flank holding off against, it was a Trigon and a Hive Tyrant that got in. We've also got, again, Krieger's holding off on the other flank against the Carnifex and another Hive Tyrant. And then there's the action shot. The Kriegers versus the Screamer Killer. The men doing their best to hold off, but struggling to pierce its chitinous hide. However, despite the fact that the Imperium was hard pressed on its flanks, Strachan understood the assignment. He knew what had to be done to secure the mission. He's killed one big bug. It's time for him to go for another. With a little bit of grenade support and a cheeky charge, Strachan goes into the Hive Tyrant and is easily able to dispatch it. Because this time he's charged. So he gets 4 rerolls to hit and 4 rerolls to wound. And he's got lethal hits. And he's got anti-monster. And he's got big AP. And he's got 2 damage. The Hive Tyrant never stood a chance. To be fair, he did get teed up. Like I said, there was a bit of shooting in the Hive Tyrant first. And then there was a little bit of grenading. And then the other guys did get to strike first. And they did take a wound off with their bayonets. But it was Strachan that did nearly all of the melee damage to the Hive Tyrant. And he claimed his second head. Been there, seen it, killed it. But by the end of turn 2, between the Tyranid combat and my combat, the guard lines are looking a bit thin. The left flank is all but gone. I think there's a few remnants left over, desperately holding on. And the right flank, well, I think all the Kriegers died. There might be 1 or 2 left over that are literally covered by the bulk of the Tyranid monstrosities. But Strachan has created a gap. And the 3rd platoon of Kriegers is pushing in behind him. Between them, they might just make it to the alien hive. And Kevin the Titan is going to make sure that they get that job done. Blaring over the speakers, he calls to his little guardsman buddies. You guys keep pushing forward. I'll keep killing them until it sticks. And surrounded on all sides by Tyranid monsters, Kevin blares the war horns and starts firing everything he's got. The Xenos close in on all sides, pouring everything they've got into the Warhound. But its void shields protect it from range firepower, and its thick armoured plates prove too tough for the Tyranids to crack. It does start taking damage, but Kevin stands. Meanwhile, Strachan, the deep striking scions, and the remnants of the 3rd Krieg blob start bringing down the last of the Tyranid monsters. The floating spore things are killed one after the other, and soon the way to the hive is open. But more and more of the Nids swarm the Titan, and soon it is surrounded on all sides and stuck in melee combat. Seeing the epic clash, seeing the sacrifice of the Titan, Strachan turns to the surviving Krieg Marshal and says, "You guys carry on to the hive, link up with the Scions, destroy that thing. We've got more bugs to kill." With a shout of "Move, move, move" to his men, Strachan charges into another one of the floating spores and chops the tentacles out from underneath it, pulls it down to the ground and splits it open from top to tail. Seeing the redoubtable Iron Hand coming to its aid, the Titan redoubles its efforts. With its Vulcan Mega Bolter, it brings down one monster, and with its Plasma Blast Gun, it fires out of combat and brings down the final Tyranid Spore. But the hive mind will not be denied its prize. Over the next desperate rounds of combat and shooting, the Titan's wounds drop and drop further until, in the last fight, Kevin is destroyed. But he is determined to take as many of them with him, and so he explodes! And in a cataclysmic explosion, where he rolls pretty much maximum on all the devastating wounds, he ends up bringing down multiple Tyranid monsters, damaging many others, and at the end of the game, this is the final picture. There is one last charge from the guard. To avenge the spirit of Kevin, Strachan does his signature maneuver of this game, which is throw grenades, then shoot the crap out of a monster, then beat it up and take its lunch money in combat. And he does bring down another Trigon. And with that, Game 3 comes to an end. And both sides had achieved their custom objective. The Titan was brought down, and I destroyed the alien hive. I was holding it by the end, and so we called it a straight up draw. And to make sure we weren't messing with anyone's points, although to be fair, no one was really worried about it at this event, me and Craig put the score in as 10 out of 100 points to both players. Literally just battle ready. That way, we shouldn't have messed with anyone's placings. And this game is absolutely a redemption for both Kevin and Strachan, who had been struggling a little bit in that last game. And by the end of it, Strachan had killed the Carnifex, the Hive Tyrant, 3 of the Spores, and also the last turn, the Trigon. So he killed 6 monsters in that one game alone. Truly, he is a beast, and he will be missed. And so, with that said, we come to the end of the video. Final score was a couple of draws and a loss, but to be honest, I don't really worry about whether I won or lost games the event. This was just a great chance to have a bit of a social, have a ton of fun, and to bring out Kevin and to say farewell to Strachan. His final tally was 6 Guardsmen, half a Praetor, half a Great Unclean One, and 6 Tyranid monsters. Hope you guys all enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.